Baris Arduc Elcin Sangu's unexpected 2026 reunion has the internet buzzing. There is a photograph taken at a private event in Istanbul in the spring of 2026 that the internet has been obsessing over for weeks. Two people standing close, laughing at something only they seem to understand. And if you know Turkish entertainment history, if you followed what happened between these two people over the past several years, the moment you see that photo, your stomach drops. Because you know exactly who they are. And you know exactly why this image changes everything. Baris Arduc Elcin Sangu. Together again. Not on screen. Not for a project. Not by accident. The question tearing through social media is deceptively simple. What does this mean? But the answer, if there even is one, requires you to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to a love story that played out so publicly it became almost mythological in Turkey, and then to a separation that sent shockwaves far beyond the country's borders. Because the story of Baris Arduc Elcin Sangu is not just a celebrity story. It is a story about time, about public identity, about what happens to two people when the world treats their relationship like a performance, and what happens when that performance ends. And right now, in 2026, something new appears to be beginning. To understand why this reunion, if we can even call it that at this stage, has the internet collectively losing its mind, you have to understand what these two people meant to Turkish pop culture in the first place. Baris Arduc is not just an actor. He is a generational figure. The kind of performer who came along at exactly the right moment in Turkish television history, when the dizi format was going global, when audiences from Latin America to the Middle East were downloading episodes in the middle of the night just to keep up. He had the look, certainly, but what set him apart was something harder to define. A kind of emotional intelligence on camera. A stillness that made you lean in. He made you feel like whatever scene he was in was the most important scene in the world. Elcin Sangu is, in every sense of the word, his equal. She built her career with a careful precision that people often underestimate because she makes it look effortless. Before the fame, before the magazine covers, before the brand deals and international recognition, she did the work. Studied. Refined. Showed up. By the time the Turkish entertainment world placed her and Baris in the same orbit, she was already the kind of actress who elevated every project she touched. And then, somewhere in the middle of all that professional success, they fell in love. At least, that is what the world believed. Their relationship became one of those rare things in celebrity culture, a pairing that felt genuinely real. Not manufactured. Not a promotional stunt timed to a new project. Fans in Turkey and internationally watched their interactions with something close to reverence. They were careful with each other in public. Warm. There was a natural ease between them that no publicist coaches and no stylist coordinates. You either have that with someone or you do not. For years, they were the couple. The one that made people feel hopeful about love. And then came the silence. It did not happen dramatically. There was no explosive tabloid headline, no televised breakup, no public statement shattering the illusion overnight. What happened was quieter and in some ways more painful. They simply stopped appearing together. Their social media presences, once occasionally overlapping, separated entirely. Carefully worded comments from both sides, and then nothing. The Turkish press speculated furiously. Fans built entire theories on the flimsiest evidence, a liked post here, an absence at an industry event there. By the time it became clear that Baris Arduc Elcin Sangu were no longer together, it felt like a small mourning. Not just for the fans who had followed them for years, but for the idea of them. Because what people had projected onto this couple was enormous. They represented something people wanted to believe in. And when that ended, the world moved on, the way the world always does, but it never quite forgot. Baris went on to significant professional success. New projects. Critical acclaim. A growing international profile. He gave interviews that were thoughtful and guarded in equal measure. He talked about his craft. He deflected questions about his personal life with a smile that gave nothing away and seemed almost practiced in its warmth. He dated, or at least the press reported that he dated, and those stories came and went without much lasting narrative weight. Elcin, meanwhile, built something remarkable. Her post-relationship career did not dip the way tabloid culture sometimes predicts for women in these situations. It accelerated. She took roles that surprised people, demonstrated range that quieted critics, expanded her brand into territories that felt genuinely aligned with who she actually seemed to be as a person. She became more herself in public, if that makes sense, less filtered, more direct, funnier and sharper in interviews than anyone expected. She seemed free in a way that was genuinely admirable. And both of them, independently, became bigger than they ever were together. Which is why the spring of 2026 hit like a thunderclap. The event where they were photographed together was, by all accounts, a low-key industry gathering in Istanbul. Not a premiere. Not a red carpet. Not the kind of event where every detail is choreographed for maximum media impact. It was the kind of evening where people in Turkish entertainment get together to simply exist for a few hours without cameras pointed at them. Except, as always happens, a camera found them anyway. The photograph circulated first on a small Turkish fan account before the algorithm caught it and threw it into the international stratosphere. Within 48 hours, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. The comment sections were extraordinary. People who had not thought about either of them in years suddenly had very strong opinions. In Turkey, the conversation was intimate and intense, the way conversations about national figures always are. Internationally, it tapped into something broader, the universal fascination with the possibility of second chances, with the idea that two people who once loved each other might find their way back. Here is what we actually know, and it is worth being precise about this, because the internet has not been particularly interested in precision. They were seen at the same event. They were photographed near each other. Multiple sources present at the gathering described them as friendly, relaxed in each other's company. That is the confirmed reality. Everything else, the speculation about reconciliation, the rumors about a shared project, the theories about secret meetings over the preceding months, is exactly that. Speculation. Rumors. Fan theory. But speculation has a life of its own. A Turkish entertainment journalist who was not present at the event but spoke to people who were described the atmosphere between Baris and Elcin as, and this is a paraphrase of what was reported, noticeably warm but not ostentatious. Not a couple performing their reunion for an audience. Just two people who seemed to have made a kind of peace. The journalist was careful not to read too much into it. Others were not so careful. Social media, predictably, went further. There were people claiming with absolute certainty that a reconciliation had been confirmed, sharing screenshots of things that had been neither confirmed nor denied, constructing timelines from public data, from location tags and mutual friends and the timing of certain posts that were genuinely impressive in their architectural detail and almost entirely disconnected from anything verified. The human impulse to complete a story, to find the ending it deserves, is powerful. And the story of Baris and Elcin was always one that people felt deserved a specific kind of ending. What makes this moment so culturally interesting is not just the event itself. It is what the event reveals about how we have collectively related to these two people over the years. Baris Arduc spent the better part of the last several years navigating a very specific kind of fame. He was genuinely beloved, but he was also boxed in by that love in ways that can become suffocating. When your public image is inseparable from a relationship, when people have constructed a version of you that exists primarily in the context of another person, stepping outside that frame requires real courage. He did it professionally and personally, and watching him do it was fascinating for anyone paying attention. Elcin's journey was different but equally instructive. There is a particular kind of scrutiny that follows women in entertainment after a high-profile relationship ends, a subtle but persistent pressure to explain yourself, to frame your independence as either recovery or defiance. She seemed to refuse both framings. She did not present her post-relationship life as healing or as a statement. She just lived it. And audiences noticed. And now here they are, in the same room, laughing at something only they understand. There is, floating in the background of all this, a rumor that deserves to be addressed directly and carefully. Several entertainment publications have reported, with varying degrees of sourcing, that Baris and Elcin may be attached to the same upcoming project, a potential collaboration that would mark the first time they have worked together professionally in years. The details are thin. The sourcing is weak. Neither their representatives nor any production company has confirmed anything. It could be genuine industry chatter. It could be wish fulfillment dressed up as reporting. But it is worth noting that in the Turkish entertainment industry, professional reunion often precedes personal reconciliation in the public imagination, even when the two things are entirely separate. The idea of seeing them on screen together again is something that a very large number of people clearly want, and that desire creates its own gravitational pull in how stories get told about them. What is undeniably true is that the internet conversation around this photograph has reignited something. Interest in their individual work has spiked measurably. Old interviews are being recirculated and watched again with fresh eyes. People are revisiting the history, going back to the beginning of their story, reading between lines in old statements that at the time seemed straightforward. Memory is being revised in real time. This is the strange alchemy of celebrity reunion narratives. They do not just spark conversation about what might be happening now. They send people backward. They force a kind of retrospective that reframes everything that came before. And what people are finding when they go back is interesting. Because viewed from 2026, the story of Baris and Elcin looks different than it did when it was happening in real time. The care they took, the dignity they maintained throughout their separation, the way neither of them used the other as material for interviews or public processing, all of that lands differently now. It looks less like restraint born of legal caution and more like genuine respect. Like two people who understood that whatever they were to each other was real enough to protect. That, perhaps more than the photograph itself, is what has people so emotional. There is a comment that has been widely shared under one of the posts featuring the photograph. It was written in Turkish and translated in dozens of different ways across platforms, but the essential meaning is this: some things are worth waiting for. The person who wrote it was not necessarily predicting a reconciliation. They were not making a claim about what the photograph means. They were expressing something more fundamental. A feeling. The feeling that despite everything, despite time and distance and changed circumstances, and all the ways people grow and diverge and become different versions of themselves, there is something that endures. Some thread that does not break. Whether that thread leads somewhere new for Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu, no one outside their private lives can say. What we can say is that they are both extraordinary. What we can say is that they handled one of the most publicly scrutinized relationships in Turkish entertainment with a grace that frankly shamed the media machine that surrounded it. What we can say is that when a photograph of two people laughing at a party can stop the internet cold, it tells you something about how deeply they got under people's skin. Not because of scandal, not because of drama, but because of the genuine thing they seemed to have and the genuine people they seem to have become. The Turkish entertainment world is watching. The international fan base is watching. And somewhere in Istanbul, two people who once meant everything to each other are simply living their lives, largely indifferent to the global conversation their laughter has restarted. Maybe they find their way back to each other. Maybe that photograph is the beginning of something. Maybe it is just two old friends at a party, and the story the world is building around it is entirely a work of collective imagination. Maybe the truth is somewhere in between, as it usually is. But here is the thing about Baris Arduc and Elcin Sangu that this moment has made unmistakably clear. The world never stopped caring. Not really. You can unfollow someone. You can move on to the next story, the next couple, the next cultural moment demanding your attention. But the real ones stay with you. The ones that felt true. And when you see them again, even in a single photograph, even across years and silence and all the miles that time puts between people, something in you recognizes them. Something in you says, I remember this. And maybe, just maybe, they remember it too. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.